Good evening and welcome to Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation. My name is Donna Gray Banks, your host, and it is Monday night all over again, and my Steelers won, so I should have my shirt on. But looking out for the Steelers, we're going to the playoffs, guys. So don't be mad. We're just going, and we love it. So all my Steeler fans, thank you very much. And tonight, my special guest is Sonte'nish Myers, and she is going to be the Fresh Book Festival featured filmmaker, say that 5 times, this year in 2024 at our book festival. And so she is the first female filmmaker that we have brought to the town, and we are so excited about that. So Denise, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a long time. It's 2020 since we've seen each other on camera together. And so Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation is brought to you by Eyeless Diamonds LLC, Lee's Press, Milton McCulloch, author of Love and Emancipation, a Dante production, and of course, the Fresh Book Festival, which will be held in the beautiful city of Daytona Beach, 22, 23, 24 in the year of 2024. Please register. Registration is open, www.freshbookfestivals.net. And we already have 20 authors registered. Now, we have to tap out at 50. So come on, it's only the end of November. So register now. We have early registration on board. If you have any questions for Ms. Myers, please leave them in the chat room. And this conversation is being recorded. So yay, we're so happy to have you, Ms. Myers. So tell the audience just a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Sure. Again, hi. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Donna. It's like every single time we connect, it's like no time has passed, and you're so wonderful. So thank you for creating this space.
Thank you.
Gosh, about me. Whenever I think about answering this question, I always go to my parents first. So I always just think about Oregon. And so I think about how my mom is from the Eastern Shore of Maryland and how my dad is from St. Elizabeth, Jamaica, and how both of those senses of home just really influence the way I see the world and the way I approach stories. I'm a writer and a director and a photographer. I studied at NYU Graduate Film, where I'm currently an adjunct professor. And I love teaching, I love writing, I love directing, and I love working across genres and across mediums. And I'm happy to be here.
So have you run into any of your students? Like, I don't know. I mean, then they say, "What are you doing here, Professor Myers?"
A couple times on the subway, and I'm just like, "Oh, hello," or like Afropunk. It's happened once or twice,
right? But I meant in the business. Have they ever showed up for?
Yeah, because we're all, I think there was like a poet. Oh gosh, I wish I could remember his name. I read this post of his when I was in college, and he talked about how there's always people that are kind of moving, and I don't mean this hierarchically, just in progression,
right
kind of moving above you and kind of reaching towards where you are as well, and how that's kind of a constant and ongoing position. And I think the same thing is with my students. Like I see my students kind of receiving screenwriting grants that I received, 5 or 7 years ago. So it's all about the generations. And yeah, we're often in the same spaces, running into each other at screenings or supporting each other's films. Sometimes my former students, they've worked on some of my music videos. So, it's communal always.
And we talk about that in the melanated literary world. There's really not a whole lot of us, right? And so we tend to know each other or run into each other in different cities. I was at the airport coming from Birmingham. Miss Don, I was like, oh, And so it's really, really nice. It's really nice to have that kind of small world. And so just you said you're a writer, you're a filmmaker. What came first?
Oh, none of them actually. I thought that I was going to work in diversity and inclusion when that was a more novel line of work, or just a kind of a more novel term. So that was what I thought I was going to do. I had kind of been in that space since high school and then in college, and I thought that's what I was going to do because I was really obsessed with this notion of identity and what influences our perceptions of ourselves and our perceptions of each other. And so that's what I thought I was going to do. But then after I graduated, my world just opened up more. I studied painting in Italy because I was always kind of like a hobbyist painter. And that kind of had me thinking. It really refined my relationship with being a visual artist and what it means to perceive your subject and misperceive your subject when you're trying to capture them. And then when I was living, after that, I moved to China, where I lived for about a year and a half. And I was constantly thinking about how film and television influences all these perceptions. But it wasn't until while I was living there, the trial against George, when George Zimmerman was put on trial for murdering Trayvon Martin, I was with a friend from high school in China, and we were just glued to YouTube watching the trial. And when the verdict was announced not guilty, that was kind of my aha moment. And I realized, oh, I didn't want to critique. I felt like I was coming in too late, critiquing what was being made and influencing us. I really wanted to be on the ground floor and making the stories and making the images. And so I moved to New York, where I'm from, and started getting on any film set I could until someone planted the seed to apply to film school.
Did anime have anything to do with your reason to want to go to China?
No, no, not at all. Actually, I that would be a great reason, but I applied to this minor program that was international. It was called International Development, and the first class in there, the professor had everybody raise their hand, saying, "Raise your hand if you've been to 1 to 2 countries," and everyone raised their hand. And I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be good at this. Like, I'm gonna make it far." And then it was like, "Raise your hand if you've been to 2 to 5, and then 5 to 10." And my hand dropped down really quickly, and I was like, "Oh, I haven't been to that many countries. I've just been to the same country, Jamaica, many times." And I just was in this room of all these well-traveled people who hadn't even, seen past 21. And I was like, oh no, I got to change this. So I just applied to any teaching English as a second language job. And I was just going to go with the best deal. I didn't care where I went. And so
Really?
best gig was in China. So that's where I went.
And how long were you there?
A year and a half.
Yeah. And so speaking of diversity and inclusion, how much did you get stared at?
So I was a lot all the time, but I was living in Beijing, which has a lot of universities, and there's like a lot of African communities living there. So, but not a lot of Black Americans. I peeped that. It's very rare to run into a Black American, but I would like meet people from the African continent often enough. So I wasn't completely novel. I had friends who lived in and worked in more rural areas where it was kind of amplified, but it was most of the time, in my experience, it was a genuine curiosity. If you think about like how long China has had its doors open to the rest of the world, it ain't been
closed, right?
And so as long you can feel when a curiosity is sincere and kind, and that was what I experienced most of the time.
Were you able to manage the language while you were there, or yeah?
I think which I feel like a lot of Black people are, which is if you have any musical ability, any sensitivity to tone, like you can rock with it. And I think Mandarin is quite beautiful in that way.
So storyteller, artist, filmmaker, directed, and casting. How do you make all that work? Is that's like a storyboard? You have Post-it notes everywhere. I mean, how do you make that work?
Honestly, it's not doing it alone. When I see people who are like, I'm a writer, I'm an editor, I'm a producer, I'm like, cool, you can do that if you want to, but like I enjoy collaborating with other people. And so you have, and all of them, especially once you get to the feature level, like they're all like these little marriages. Like once you agree to work on a project together, y'all are rocking with each other for at least like 2 to 5 years,
Right.
So, you meet a producer, producers are just like the gems, and honestly, I think really at the center of filmmaking to me. Where it's like, okay, do we have the shared vision? Do we see this thing in the same way? And they just really support you in executing and getting the film made. And then, you know, working with casting directors, that's another thing. Like, it's just everyone, if you're lucky, you can have someone who only has one or two jobs, and then they get to really do that really well. And so every film demands a different thing, a different approach, a different type of cast, a different type of auditioning process. I'm happy to go to dive deeper into that if you like, but yeah.
You can. Other question I have is, do you have producers who come and say, listen, I love the project. I don't really want to be, you know, I'm gonna fund it and walk away from it until it's done.
That would be a dream. That would be may your lips reach God's ears.
Yeah. May the gods hear my voice, right? Okay. Because most people who are financially involved want to be, you know, a part of everything that goes on.
And I've met a couple where they take pride in just being the check, and they'll say that up front. Usually it's co-financing. It's usually not a full financing. Usually it's really going all in, like they want to really be a part of the project from the ground up. But it does happen. It does happen.
So I want the younger generation to kind of know that when it comes to what you do, you don't always have to be in front of the camera. Let's talk about everything, because when you did, and that wasn't on here when we did this interview years ago, the music film, Bangers.
Oh, Tanking Bangers, yeah.
So there are a lot of young people in the trailer helping you and being a part of it, right? And so let's talk to the young people about not always having to see yourself in front of the camera, but all the opportunities behind the camera.
So many opportunities. And I'm still realizing, oh yeah, like the rabbit hole goes so deep. I was just catching up with someone who was in the car being driven by a Black Teamster, which is a Teamster is someone to be very they're so essential to how a film production moves, but a lot of times they're making runs and driving people and picking up like a certain fabric for a production designer at this warehouse in Jersey. But if you actually look at the Teamster union, it's actually not very diverse. It's mostly white people, and it's a big deal if you're a Black Teamster in the union. So there's at that level, there's people who are grip and electric, who do the heavy lifting and the delicate work of building the lighting for the gaffer, who's the head of the lighting department. So there's that. There's someone who is the camera operator. Like, I am still in love with like the Steadicam op who did the Steadicam operation on that Tank and the Bangers music video. Like, he did gorgeous work and was just so responsive.
He did. Oh my.
Did really gorgeous work. And a lot of times it was trust. Like, we were running out of time. So me and my director of photography, Ron, we had to go shoot something while he was improvising with the dancers over there. And I just gave him a couple of directions and he just went. And like, there's so many different gigs that are not just satisfying and creatively significant, but also like make money. And when you're good at it and when you do it well, people want to work with you again and again, and you will not run out of work.
And here's the other thing. When we talk about what goes on behind the camera, they're also catering positions. Okay, let's talk about those other sundry things that you can do when you're part of a film. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, you broke up at the end for me there. Can you repeat the end?
I said, let's talk about other things like the sundry things, the catering, whatever else you can do to be part of a film. You don't have to. When you said, Donna, I would do anything. Just go to the film set and do it. Is that the learning experience, or do you come in wanting to do something specific, or you just want to learn everything?
I mean, they say that everyone should PA at first. You know, like my first couple film gigs, I was a PA. meaning a production assistant. So you're really like the all hands on deck. And sometimes it's grabbing coffee, sometimes it's making runs, but there's like a classic production assistant manual that you can find on Google where it's like, you should never be seen standing still. Like you are always supposed to be on the move, lending a helping hand. And it gives you a real understanding of how a production operates. And then people pay attention to really great PAs. And there's even, I know that New York does, I can't speak for any other states, but Made in New York actually has a production assistant program where you can go in and be a paid production assistant. And then you get supported and you can work up the rungs, because not everybody has to go to film school. Film school worked for me because I really need that type of structure. I respond to an academic environment, but there's so many filmmakers who like came up just through film sets and just working and PAing initially. And then if you want to specify, like if you're thinking about producing, you can, one of my early jobs was being a producer's assistant. And that person I was an assistant to is like my mentor to this day. She executive produced my first music video. And so like that's like one of the most like significant just relationships I've ever had. And then but if you are thinking about being working behind the camera specifically, you can be a camera PA where you're specifically a production assistant to that department and so on. And so you can specialize, but it's good to just kind of like get your feet wet and just kind of experience how a set operates, so then you can see what you like, what you don't like. It's like dating, honestly.
Oh, let's not talk there.
All of this is dating. It feels like.
and that gets, you know, different as your decades go. But let's talk about Samaya Joy.
Oh, Samara, yeah.
Oh, Samara, is that how you pronounce it?
Oh,
So yeah. She opened up for the Jacksonville Jazz Festival last year. What a talent. What an absolute talent. Mm-hmm. So where were you were you in a room when somebody whispered, hey? And I love that song. It's one of my favorite Nancy Wilson songs. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, she, you can tell. Go ahead.
Oh, well, Samara. So Samara is a talented young jazz. 24.
Yeah.
And she, well, I won't spoil the ending, but basically the song was just sent to me, and it's a cover of Dinah Washington's Guess Who I Saw Today. And there have been a lot of covers of this jazz standard over the years, but Dinah's is the most kind of popular and celebrated.
I thought it was Nancy Wilson. Sorry.
Nancy Wilson. Thank you. Thank you. I was just
listen, it's the age thing. I know all that. Sorry.
Just listening to Dinah this morning. That's what happened. So Nancy Wilson, thank you. So Nancy Wilson popularized the standard, but I gotta say, not that I like to frame things that way, but I think Samara's competes. Like,
yeah.
I just got sent the submission. It was like a little brief. And I know that they needed to keep like they wanted a scaled down kind of grounded music video. I was like, well, let me listen to this song. And it's like 10 seconds in and you're like, oh, well, of course, who would say no? She has a voice like, oh man, it's like Nina and Ella combined. It's just, but also her own thing. Like she's just fabulous and super thoughtful, super kind. And I was lucky enough to direct her music video, and then she ended up winning her first Grammy like later on that year. So I feel like I got really lucky. I've gotten really lucky. Even with Tank and the Bangas, they got nominated for that album also.
Yeah.
So for Samara Joy, that music video, we wanted to, we especially with, you know, Samara being 24, we were like, okay, are these lyrics like kind of mature for, you know, is this scenario kind of mature? So we wanted to touch on the themes, but keep it kind of subtle and restrained. And so we kind of did it through shadows and silhouettes. And it's just kind of a black and white noir vibe. And she's very easy to direct. So we found a location in Brooklyn touching Queens, and we just needed something. We wanted to find that's another job, a location scout. If I couldn't be a writer director, I would want to be a location scout, because locations do so much of everything. Like you can have a good movie just with a fire location and some good actors. And so that's another really amazing job you can do in the industry. So we found this this old house in Brooklyn, and there was so much texture on the walls, because if you're shooting in black and white, you really need to lean into the textures of everything. So there would just kind of be these spiky textures on the walls and these vintage couches. And we kind of wanted it to be dilapidated because this relationship was falling apart in the song. We loved like the kind of paint peeling off the walls. And so it's all about everyone kind of seeing that and getting on the same page and making every decision in service to the same vision. And so there's so much communication that revolves around that. But I had a very generous team that worked in that building with no AC, and it was great.
There was one scene in the video where there were 5 shades of gray, including the lighting from the window where she stands. And I thought, how did she do that? That was amazing.
That's very kind. I had an amazing DP, an amazing gaffer, and I could just be like, this is exactly what I'm thinking. They'll be like, okay. And it's like sorcery. I think filmmaking is sorcery. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, because it's darker on the outside, and then kind of, kind of just shades in the shades of gray, which when you're in a situation and you're kind of breaking up in a situation, you are gray. You go and you do fade to black. You start with the light at the window, and then you fade to black. I thought, who did that? It was wonderful. Anyway, if you have not seen it, it is amazing video. Please, everybody, go out and see it. Go ahead.
That reminds me also, I'm just going to keep on saying them when they come to me. So in terms of like, I had an amazing colorist who, it's like, we can decide that it's black and white, but you don't just desaturate the colors. We every single scene, every single frame, we're like, okay, how black do we want that? Can we fix that over there? So post-production is also a whole other gorgeous field. Like, if you really love video effects, like, you can specialize at a post house, like all of these different things. But I had a colorist, even though it's black and white, you still need a colorist for that type of
thing. And when I was watching it, that one particular scene said so much for me. So can't even imagine what it says for other people, because everybody has a different lens, right? So when it went from pretty much light and then shades of gray to black, it didn't come inward, it went out, right? Because that's how a relationship starts. It's really light in the beginning, right? And then, then stuff starts to happen, and then, the curtains fall in. So that was amazing. I mean, I must have watched it 30 times, because one of my favorite songs, first of all, by the incomparable Nancy Wilson, and fabulous job. So short films. Now, since you are a Star Wars fan, how is it that you decided to do more societal than space age?
Well, hopefully we're having a very different conversation in a year or so.
Oh,
but currently, I think 2 things are true. I think one, I went to a program that really encouraged dramatic storytelling. And so that was just kind of what I did. And I wouldn't change anything, because I want to know how to tell a story with characters first, because once you knock that out, then you can bring the world building in and you're good. You know what I mean? I think if I led with figuring out the bells and whistles of science fiction, maybe I wouldn't have learned how to write fully fleshed characters. I also figured out like my writing process by realizing, some writers, they need to write their characters before they know their plot or the world. But I learned, as a true science fiction writer, I think I am at heart, I write from the outside in. So I need to know the world and the circumstances, and then I discover who my characters are. So I would say that I want to write about people, and then and also write about women kind of facing their inner worlds and facing different power dynamics. I think that's going to be interesting to me, whether or not it's in space or in a house, And I think also my favorite filmmakers, in terms of versatility, I really admire Spike and Spielberg, which I know is like easy to say, but I love them for their versatility in the sense that Spielberg can do Catch Me If You Can and E.T., and it's the
Right.
same voice, and it's the same story. It's about a main character struggling with his parents' divorce. If you
Right.
think, right? And so that's the type of filmmaker I aspire to be. So I feel like making the narrative short films that are a little bit more societal gives me the right foundation so that once I break out into kind of grander epics and mythologies, I still have that framework. And I also love Star Wars for not just its sci-fi aspect, but for all the archetypes. Like
Right.
I love the mentor archetype. I'm like obsessed with the mentor archetype. And so, and the shape shifting archetype, the one that you really don't know if you can trust them or not. And so, I love the mythology in Star Wars, and that will continue on in future work.
Oh, that's wonderful. So when it happens, we do have one of the largest aeronautical universities in the
Oh,
United States, and that would be Embry-Riddle, right? So they would love to have a featured space movie by a woman brought to them, I'm sure. So we will talk them into it. I don't think we'd have to do a whole lot of talking. I think it would be a great experience for everybody. So casting,
yeah.
there's two young ladies in Cross My Heart
Mhm.
that have, I'm sure they didn't know each other. So how do you get that kind of synergy? Or maybe they did, I don't know.
They
But
did
how do
not.
you, okay, how do you get that kind of synergy between two people? Now, all the other characters were good, but that had to be um well oiled because of the connections that they had and the things that they went through together. How did that happen?
I admit some of it is luck. I think I just had two awesome actresses. So I think and not just luck, but luck isn't the right word. That film is very much the result of the generosity of many Black women in my life. I have a mentor filmmaker. She's a producer in Jamaica who touched base with her casting director friend who found Jada, the Jamaican cousin. And then I found Jordan Amanda. She acted in another film friend, her film. And so some of it is luck and destiny and intentionality. But I would say that it was such a family cultured set. Like we shot in the house that I grew up, like I partially grew up in. And we also stayed in that house. That's my aunt's house.
Ah,
So, by the end of it, everybody was calling my Aunt Donna auntie. And so there was a lot of, and I think also it helps that it was really just the two of them. And so while everyone is moving around and doing whatever they have to do, all they have is each other. When I'm waking them up early to do whatever they have to do, they can hate me together, all the things.
right.
Like I think that just like them, they had to depend on each other professionally, that I think it just kind of shone through. Also, I think it was a special experience for Jordan, if I can speak of her, in the sense that she's Jamaican American but had never been to Jamaica. And so met one of her uncles for the first time at the airport. I was there watching her meet one of her Jamaican uncles for the first time. And so I think that there was just so much in it for everyone. And I'm just super, I think that we all kind of found family in the story, but found family in each other.
There's a water scene where they're both kind of just dreaming in the water.
Mm.
And my first thought was there's so many people who think that African Americans don't swim, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's that scene that shows young melanated ladies that you can get your hair wet and still come out and look really good. I mean, there's so much you can pull from that, right? Even though they were going through whatever they were going through. But I don't know, it's a wonderful film, and you'll be able to see it at the Fresh Book Festival. So if things have changed, tell me today, should a aspiring filmmaker do the same kind of work you did just for knowledge and substance, or has it changed to the point where you don't have to do all that anymore?
That's a great question. I think in some ways my answer is always the same, though I think it's kind of scary for people. in the sense that, if I'm talking to somebody who's, a senior in high school and they want to study film in undergrad, I actually tell them not to. I say, don't study film, because if you want to make film about life, what do you know if you're studying filmmaking the entire time? And so I think I'm constantly applying the classes that I took, not studying film in undergrad. So I often tell them to major in something else, even if they intend, or, if you want to minor in film, cool. But I think it's about living. I think and if I meet people who just graduated from undergrad, I'm like, oh, leave. They're like, what? And I'm like, bounce, like go to live somewhere else for a little while, like figure out, you need intel. I would say that to not just, people who are behind the camera, but actors too, anyone. I just think it's about living, and then you can find your way back to filmmaking, and then you have something to say. Thank God I didn't start making movies when I was like 21. Like they would have been so obnoxious. So I think that living is most important, and I think that's scary. One of my favorite quotes is I think it's about creativity, but this quote specifically was about writing. It was saying, to become a good writer, the question is, how alive are you willing to be? And I think about that like every day.
Alive meaning how much you're willing to tell, or how much you're willing to, what does that mean exactly?
How alive are you willing to be? Like for example, one thing I think about a lot, people are always looking at an amazing photograph and they're like, wow, look at that elephant, or look at those two children in Trinidad, like playing on the beach. But the thing is, somebody had to be there to take it. It's not just about how cool is that moment, but what in your life brought you to the position where you could even capture that moment. And that's not just getting on the flight, that's building relationships, building trust, taking risks, stepping outside of your comfort zone. That's aliveness that makes that photograph possible. And I feel the same way about screenwriting or writing anything. I think when I feel like I'm falling short in my creativity, I'm like, oh, am I being alive enough? Am I facing things enough? If I want to write about family, am I facing my family relationships as fully as I should? All these things I think are connected. And I think people try to separate it when I don't see it as separate at all.
Tell us what it was like being the cousin of one of the largest rappers the world has ever known.
You mean my uncle? So I'm his
Oh,
niece.
okay.
I would say growing up with my uncle, one, gave me and my generation of cousins, it gave us a lot of permission. Like we didn't have to deal with some of the stereotypical children of immigrant kind of expectations.
Like he broke that glass. He broke that glass was broke. Right.
Yeah, I would say that he is definitely one of the, if not the most alive person I've ever been in contact with. And so I would say that in the spirit of aliveness, I think he's a model for living and living fully and living lovingly. And so, yeah, I carry how I witnessed him, and just being a person, being a relative, and being an artist. I think I'm in constant reference to that even now. So there was that. And then it's also just kind of the privilege of bearing witness to such a golden era in hip hop. It wasn't just my uncle, but, my parents, worked at Uptown, and so it was just a privilege all around to witness.
Absolutely. And I didn't know him personally, of course, but he always gave a genuine aura when he was with people. I thought, I don't think I've ever seen him in a situation. Well, today is different, but back in the day where he was nothing but genuine, even if he was in a situation where it wasn't comfortable, he was genuine about being uncomfortable, right? Which was really, really nice. Yeah. What a talent. So when you are looking at digital things now, digitizing film and whatnot, is that easier, or does it make it more difficult because of the technology? Or was it better just to be able to shoot it, upload it, and from the old school? What, or is it better that it's a little bit of both?
I think it depends on what you want out of it. I think it's great that we have options. I think uh, whenever somebody's like, oh, X is better, I'm like, no, let's just have it all, you know? So I think that there's something about the texture of film. When I shoot all of my photography on film, every now and then I get tempted to go back to digital, and I might, but it wouldn't be abandoned. It would just be hybrid. But I think I love how patient film makes you.
Yeah.
I the emotionality on the texture of film is really gorgeous, but it's temperamental and unpredictable sometimes, especially, you know, if you're kind of rolling solo with maybe a Super 16 or a Super 8. But I think it's gorgeous and it invites a specific type of practice. I think you should always learn on film. I love that NYU, the first film you make is on 16 millimeter
Right.
film, no dialogue, all exteriors, and you're learning how to work with natural light. I think that that's a necessary rite of passage. I feel the same way about film photography because it helps you appreciate the thing, and actually know what you're making. I think when you just have a monitor and you can just kind of press buttons, maybe if you've been taught properly, you know how to appreciate it then. But I think it's easy to take it for granted, and not really understand light and what it means to make a photograph. And so I think do your thing, do, you know, whatever works for you. Like I want to start doing more underwater photography. I'm probably going to have to shoot digitally for that, even though I could do film if I wanted to. And so I think it's really thinking about what is the thing that you want to make, and then what are the tools that are going to make that in a way that feels most aligned for you. But I'm a sucker for film for sure.
Hardest thing about being in your craft as a filmmaker, and the most enjoyable.
I think it depends on where in film you work. I think as a writer and a director, it can be very lonely. It's a very solitary position, even though film is like the most collaborative medium, in my opinion. But I think it's lonely work too. It's a lot of time with yourself and navigating expectations and the expectations of others and your own. But also the antidote is the thing I love about it most, which is people. Like for me, like it's the people that you get to work with and the conversations you get to have. I love that in film. You get to skip a lot of steps. Like you can be having a general meeting with someone for the first time, and next thing you know, you're having a 2 hour conversation about your fathers. Like only that happens in film and amongst artists, you know? And so I feel like it's a space that I get to self-actualize, but I also really get to be myself. And so that's the antidote to sometimes the necessary solitude that is being a writer director.
We are going to have the privilege to see a short film about the conversation of hair.
Mm.
Right. And so I thought about that short film as I was leaving breakfast with my friend. And for 20 minutes, she talked about her hair.
Mm.
Right. And how we have difficulty just wanting our hair to be what our hair is. Right.
Mm.
We wanted to do all these different things, but there are certain things that it just won't do unless you have a concentrated effort of making it different.
Right.
What made you want to put a spotlight on how people look at you and hair? I mean, my favorite song is I Am Not My Hair, because I just think, you know, I have a group that we do. It's called The Bold, the Bald, and the Beautiful, because all of these ladies have alopecia, right? And being having alopecia myself at one time, you do find that, you know, once you get past that, you have no hair. There's nothing else to talk about, right? So why was it so important for you to do a short film like that?
Or I just want to triple check, which film are you?
That's the music film where the girl has a problem with her friends.
Black Girl Magic, BGM. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was, you know,
It's Watley. What are you doing?
in collaboration with the artist. So that was the artist, Tony. That was her song. I think that, you know, my grandmother, you know, she owned a hair salon, and I loved, you know, it was a space of like togetherness and like Black women vibing. And I love the way that we connect through hair. But, you know, I was also, you know, was very loyal to that hot comb for a very long time. And I think that I think Black women are constantly navigating how we're being perceived. I noticed that I'm treated differently when my hair is like this versus when I have braids, just walking down the street.
Really?
You know what I mean? Yeah. The cat calls are different. When it's like this, it's like, yes, queen. And then when it's in braids, it's a little bit not so.
Yeah, nice.
And I'm like, that's interesting. Like, what does that mean? And so I think we really just wanted to celebrate our magic, but kind of like in a mythological way. So we just kind of,
Yeah.
had gone to predominantly white schools at one time or another and experienced kind of like this kind of little microaggression moment that the video starts in. But then we really wanted this moment that she has when she looks in the mirror to kind of initiate this underworld of Black girl magic. And I think that no matter what we as Black people and Black women face, we carry this underworld of Black women with us. There's like a togetherness and a way that we support each other that I think we carry, and we do it in the best way. Like, I just think that the way we hold each other down is gorgeous. And so I think we really just kind of wanted to be like, hey, this world is always here and you're always a part of it. And that's a little bit about the intentions behind that video.
When I was having this conversation with her, I didn't know whether to say, girl, don't worry about it. Because, you know, she worries about it. So that's not something that you say, right? But when I remembered the movie, I thought, you know, she'll wake up one morning and decide for herself. You know, it's like having gray hair, right? You wake up one morning and say, yeah, there ain't nothing. There's absolutely nothing I can do about this. So let's accept it and try to make it better. And I think that the acceptance by the young women in the movie, by mentors, right? Really. So anyway, we're going to see that movie too, and I'm really excited about that. This whole thing is developing into, it's our 13th year, and it's my honor to have you here. There were 13 of us 13 years ago. Now we have to cut the literacy group off at 60, just because the place won't hold it, right? And so it's just an honor that you are going to come be with us, right? And being a woman in film is just wonderful. So let me, I get real weepy when I think about, the things that we have to do to get where we are, and what you've done in a short span of your life. Because there's many more years to come. So let's talk about screenplay writing really quickly. How difficult is that? How difficult is that? Because listen, I can't imagine taking my book and just cutting it down to, you have got to be a master of that and a master of being able to, even if you don't do it, right? You have to be a master of saying, okay, that story was still told. How do you do?
That's a great question. I mean, we could talk about this in two ways, right? Because there is the adaptation process, which is a process I am in the middle of right now.
Right now.
But then there's also just screenwriting, period. And I'm happy to talk about both. I think, firstly, with screenwriting, just as a medium, it's such a delicate balance because it's a blueprint, but it's an emotional blueprint. So It's not the product. It is one of the reason why filmmaking is so challenging. If I had to say what the second challenging thing is about filmmaking, it's just how many stages there are and how many mediums in one filmmaking is. And screenwriting, it all starts with the script, and it's a blueprint. It's telling people it's a device, it's a document that's about execution, but you also want it to be an emotional and enjoyable reading experience. But it's tricky because unlike with a novel where you can do a lot of interior writing, you really have to understand that you can't do that in a screenplay.
You can't do that.
You can only write what you see. And once you understand that, it's actually quite liberating because you realize how many senses you have access to, in a way that you might not quite, in the same way with novels. You can, but once you realize that you have access to all the senses, that you can write sound, that that you can like really write in textures, and make something feel sensory on the page, and really get people to feel like they're sitting in the theater. It's an extremely liberating process if you can sit down and show up to the work every day. And then in terms of a novel, it's tricky. I wouldn't think of it as cutting down. If you're doing your job right, and that's what collaboration is. You have to choose your collaborators very carefully and be like, do you see the essence of this thing? Are you seeing the core of this thing? Because I think that's what an adaptation is seeing what's core. It's also about choosing the right book. I don't think every book needs to be adapted. So there's also that, right?
Right.
But I think that it's about choosing the right novel that is like, that just brings some ease to it, but maybe the medium has something to bring it. So I think it can be hard when you're like, how do I do this novel justice? I think that's a very daunting task. But I think if you find a novel that is already kind of leaning towards that, and those senses can be tapped into, I think it's a little bit easier. But it's about knowing the essence of a novel, I think.
And our time has, God, that went really, really fast. So I will say, is there anything else you'd like to share with us before you leave? I do ask all our guests for a pearl of wisdom, but if you wanted to give, a pearl of wisdom to the aspiring filmmakers or women in the industry. I love that picture behind you, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I would say that two things. I would say what you seek is seeking you. And what you're obsessed with, like those are the stories that you want to tell. You know what I mean? The things that you're obsessed with, that you're constantly thinking about, your stories are actually in that. And don't feel like you have to reach so far outside of yourself, that you only really need to look often. You only really need to look where you're from and the people who love you to find the stories that are for you to tell. So that's what I would say and share.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for being here this evening. I appreciate you guys every Monday night, even during football season. You come and spend time with me. I certainly appreciate it. And we will see you in a couple of months. I'm so excited about that. And when the lights go out and the cell phone towers go down, all you have left is a flashlight and a good book. Thank you very much. And good night, everybody. Good night, Sonte'nish. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.